Now, to our main news this morning, Labour have been accused of failing to keep Britain safe in an ever-increasingly dangerous world.
Yes, Sir Keir Starmer's party has come under fire for not backing the government's boost in defence spending.
The Prime Minister promising £75 billion more in new funding that will show our enemies we are resolute and determined.
Well, as shadow ministers declined to promise the same, Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister, says it showed Labour could not be trusted on defence. He said Labour again refused to back our plan to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. Instead, they want to spend years holding a review as the world gets more dangerous while refusing to act to keep the British people safe.
Well, joining us now is political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heale. Good to see you this morning, James. Is it too much, actually, realistically, to ask the Labour Party to out-and-out back something which they haven't costed for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult, pledge to kind of match. If you look at, for instance, just how much Labour is willing to be very fiscally reticent in certain areas and reticent about, talking about things like health spending, for instance, I think it's very difficult for the Labour Party, which had traditionally obviously been fed money on things like welfare spending, to come out and back this kind of increase at a time when, every Labour shadow cabinet member is going around saying to Rachel Reeves, can I have some more money for this, more money for that. It's difficult for them to come out and match this kind of spending, given, as you say, £75 billion by 2030. And, of course, one person would have to ask how many votes are going to be in it from kind of the Labour Party point of view. So I think that for them it's a bit of being a sort of their initial reaction has been a bit sixes and sevens perhaps in responding to that. And that's why you've seen, say, Steve Reid, the Shadow Environment Secretary, saying slightly different things to the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, on the media round. So I think Labour are yet to come up with a kind of fully respond on this. And that's why Johnny Mercer is out there saying Labour can't be trusted on defence.
I mean, how many votes do you think could be in this, though? Because as Johnny Mercer says, and as the Tory party is saying, we are in a much more dangerous world. You would think that defence is actually going very quickly up people's priority list. And what do you think the optics look like when you've got people like Johnny Mercer saying, well, Labour are going to dither around on this whilst the world gets more dangerous?
Well, to add some context to this, I mean, over the last 2 years ago, there was basically Labour was 20 points behind on the Conservatives on defence. And over the past 2 years, they've got up much better and now actually are ahead on this as an issue. So I think this is an attempt to kind of open up a kind of clear blue water and then trying to tie this into other things as well, saying Labour can't be trusted on taxation, Labour can't trust on security, and I think that's what they're going to be trying to do. Obviously, it's very difficult for the Conservatives to kind of, 20 points behind the polls overall right now, but I think that this is an attempt to kind of both of all unite the party behind a pro-spending message and also try and put the fight towards Labour, because Labour, of course, every time they've had things like the 28 billion Green New Deal on this, they've actually really suffered to kind of get their figures out right. So I think that for the Conservatives, there is a bit of heart to be taken from this, and, I think you've seen that in the response so far. People like Mark Francois, critic of Sunak, coming out and supporting this. So I think the optics are about, they would like to present it as, the Conservatives are finally taking national security seriously.
Yeah, and it's all well and good. And I know this is the most stupid point to make because everyone plays politics with everything, especially in an election year. It just never seems right to me to be playing politics with our defence.
Yes, quite. And I think we also see a general trend every election where you have a 5-year parliament and in year 4 or year 5 they start spending more money, having cut it earlier in the parliament. And I do think the defence has suffered over the past sort of 10, 14 years or so, which is that, of course, I'm surprised David Cameron's a foreign secretary. Well, when he was Prime Minister, the number in the military, I think, had dropped by about a third or so in terms of the armed forces headcount. So I do think that there are questions to answer. I mean, Sunak and his government would say, look, the nature of threats has changed. We've known this for the past sort of 2-3 years or so. Ukraine has shown that. And so I think now they would say probably it's better late than never. And the question is whether Labour will match that, given how, so far in the past 48 hours, they've been a bit all over the place with this.
There is some scrutiny still for the Tories, though, isn't there, about how this uplift is going to be fully funded. We've talked about cuts to the civil service, haven't we? But we don't know where they're going to be. And that's still not enough, is it?
Yes, I'm old enough to remember 2 years ago when Boris Johnson made this exact same pledge in Madrid at the 2022 NATO summit. Back then, of course, there was talk that they were going to cut 91,000 civil service jobs. That came to naught. So I think from looking at the kind of early costings of this proposal, they say 75,000 civil servants will be out, or 70,000 civil servants. I would struggle to see where those are going to fall, particularly if you think now that health and the schools and defence are all protected, where are you going to find those kind of big budget savings? Is it going to fall, for instance, on Justice Department? Is it going to fall on, say, transport? And so all these different areas have a special case. So I would think that a lot more detail needs to be found out about it. But for now, the initial reaction, I think the government can be happy with how that's gone down.
Yeah. In terms of Labour, though, on this, they may not be confirming anything yet. I mean, they'd be crazy not to find a way to do this, ultimately, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that people who are more pro-defence spending in the Labour Party have made the case to me that, you know, you can tie this into something like levelling up, for instance. You can look at Barrow and Furness, the jobs that we've created in kind of industrial areas, and, you know, I think in sectors. And so I think that they can tie this into the wider message that Rachel Reeves has been talking about in terms of security, in terms of, you know, making sure that supply chains are safe, in terms of making sure that our economy is sort of waterproof against the shocks of the financial system. There is a potential way to do this in a certain way. So I think that they ought to be looking at this, certainly, and I'm sure that this work is going on behind the scenes right now.
Oh, you know, anyone who mentions Barrow and Furness is good in my books. That's my hometown. Lovely stuff, James. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. Do let us know what you make of that. gbnews.com/yoursay.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, as I say, Labour, and we were talking to Labour a little bit later on this morning, so we'll ask them about it. But can't make a commitment yet. Well, no, because it's very difficult when they say everything's fully costed, which of course it's got to be.